Again, my name is John Grice. I serve as the Director of Fine Arts at Stevenson High School. We are up in Lincolnshire, Illinois, which is about halfway between Milwaukee and Chicago. And my role here is I oversee the music, art, theater, and dance program. I help plan curriculum, instruction, assessment, work with our faculty, and I also plan professional development for all the fine arts. So it's a really great job, a great program, great school, and very proud to serve in this capacity in this community. Prior to this, I taught art and was the department chair of the fine arts department at Riverside Brookfield High School. And prior to that, I was an undergrad at Northern Illinois University, where I got my Bachelor's of Art Education. So tonight I'm excited to share with you really the story of what we've been doing up here, and really kind of talk about some processes that we've gone through that are efficient and really what we feel is effective to really unpack and make meaning of the standards, and then go into a process of writing student learning targets, which is a real common denominator that we've been using for curriculum design here. And once we've developed these learning targets, they can be used to lesson plan and develop curriculum. So up here, you got my contact information. Please, if you guys have questions beyond this, my lines are always open, so I'm always happy to help. Oh, this is interesting. There we go. So how many of you get nervous seeing this? Yeah, and I got extremely nervous, and you know, talking to teachers, they get this stresses them out. Thinking about all the language, the wording, the grids, it's overwhelming at times. And really, the process that we've developed is to work together through this and make meaning of our in our own words and our own vernacular. So tonight, what I'm hoping to do is, first and foremost, I want to share a model. It's a consortium articulation model. I want to review the conceptual framework and vocabulary encoding. And then we're going to engage you in a collaborative process to unpack and interpret. The last and not least, we'll show you how we create common ICANN learning targets. So first and foremost, this model of a consortium for Stevenson High School is that Stevenson is a one school district. We're one building. We have 4,200 students, so it's a massive building. We have 5 art teachers, we have 8 music teachers, 4 dance teachers, and 2 theater teachers. But we have 6 different sender districts that feed into us. And one thing that was really amazing when I first came here in 2010 was this concept of a consortium. And the consortium is really an association, which is typically several businesses or companies. And when you think of that model for school districts, especially in the state of Illinois, where there's always K through 8 or private or high schools or, you know, unit districts, you know, for those districts that are separated, how do we unite them? And the model of a consortium is really appealing. So with Stevenson, we have a couple districts with Fremont and Diamond Lake that just a portion of the schools come into. But then we have the Killdeer, Aptekissick, Lincolnshire Prairie, and Buffalo Grove, St. Mary's, where a lot of the students then come to our high school. So this idea of a consortium is we're really forming together to serve as best we can a K through 12 program. And then this concept of an articulation, and many of you guys might think of like course articulation for colleges, but this is the process by which one institution matches its coursework that's completed by another institution. So, you know, how does the 8th grade art class at this district match the 8th grade art class in that district? And how do these experiences then align nicely so then when the students come to the high school, it's a nice, smooth, aligned experience. So Obviously, theoretically, that sounds great and wonderful. As we all know, in the elective areas in the fine arts, that's not always a smooth transition because there's a lot of challenges, right? We know that not only are there multiple school districts and schools, in the fine arts elective areas, they have different access to the classes and resources. We know there's student contact time and adult participation and buy-in. So these are all real challenges of facing this consortium articulation model. So the process, the story that we really started focusing on is first and foremost, let's brand this. Let's really form an identity. I kept seeing articulation and all I kept seeing was the word art. And I'm like, that's pretty cool. Let's really make that an important aspect of articulation. And the goal from the very beginning, since I came here, was let's build and sustain relationships with our K-12 art teachers and administrators. And, you know, find those allies, open up those lines of communication, push out those advocacies, and really work together to really emphasize that we are one. We are one program, and we need to think of the students' experiences, especially when we're looking at the standards. I'll talk more about that in a minute. The other real goal is how do we continue and expand K-12 fine arts experiences and events for our students and community. We know that we're pretty good at hosting art shows and fine arts festivals and getting out to share information about our programs with our students. So we want to continue to expand and build on those for our students and community sakes. But then last and not least was really this focus on how do I program engaging professional development for our K-12 arts teachers. And I think an important aspect of this is how can we do this as often as we can? So how do we plan this? At first, it was just one day a year I had them. It was actually only a meeting for about 4 hours. We then expanded it to a full day meeting. Then we had 2 meetings. This year, because of the Illinois Art Standards, we're actually meeting 4 times throughout the year where we're really focusing on professional development and unpacking these standards. But this was the first model when I came in. And throughout our professional development, we really had some pretty amazing workshops. We started taking Chicago excursions where we'd actually, you know, who wants to be in the conference room all day and you know, talk and look at presentations? Let's get out into Chicago, work with professionals and really be inspired. So we went down to see the Spiral Workshop with Olivia Goody. We checked out the West Loop Galleries. 2012, worked with our friend Jerry Steffel at Intuit, brought in Stephen Campaglia to work with art and technology. Went down to Gallery 37 with Mario Rosero and Franklin Arts Academy for a site visit. In 2013, this is when the National Core Art Standards came out, so we started doing some introductory just previewing. At the time, NCAS was looking for feedback on the standards, so we participated in that. Brought in Doug Boughton, talked about assessment and visual arts, and then we actually had a panel discussion about developing an understanding for National Core Art Standards. Interestingly enough, you can really do some amazing things with the cost of a bus and bringing some brown bag, paper lunch bags to just go out and eat, and really focus on some great professional development. I really used IAEA as a model. You know, how can we look at this group as a model for IAEA to serve for professional development? Went to Ed Paschke's Art Center, visited the 606 and had a graffiti literacy lesson for our art teachers. And even I stalked Tony Fitzpatrick at his gallery and begged and pleaded him to please let us come in, and he eventually allowed us to come in, so we got to see the artist in his studio. Last year, we went to Roger Brown's studio collection and checked out the DePaul Art Museum, which actually has a really nice place to work where we started unpacking the standards. But interestingly enough, despite all these, you know, professional development activities, I had to ask a question, while these were really enriching, are they transforming the way we work together? You know, are they really moving the needle on how we work with students? And I just couldn't answer yes to that. You know, I think we thought they were great. We had a good time. They changed the way we thought sometimes, but as a whole, did they help transform the way we worked with kids? And that's where I saw some real potential with both the National Core Art Standards and the Illinois Art Standards, because now we have, you know, a model, we have something to strive for and really emphasize the way we work. So now the consortium articulation model is how are we using the Illinois Arts Standards to both vertically and horizontally align our student outcomes. So that's really the shift that we've been focusing on. And our outcome of this work is going to be to develop grade 2, 5, 8, and advanced high school learning targets. These are going to be focusing on skills and not necessarily how to teach it or what to teach. So that's going to really allow some flexibility both for schools and districts. This is also going to allow us, by having the grade 2, 5, 8, and advanced high school learning targets, this is more of setting up also benchmarks. So by grade 2, all students should be able to do this. By grade 5, this allows for flexibility for the early elementary kids, elementary schools, to have some flexibility of reaching these targets by the age of grade 2. Same for grade 5 and grade 8 in high school. As we know, many school districts have varying levels of experiences and classes. That's the exact same as our model here with the various consortium schools. And we wanted to offer that flexibility amongst schools and teachers. So this has been our shift in our consortium articulation model and our goals, and I'm going to walk you through how we got to this point. All right, so the next aspect we're going to talk about is just the overall conceptual framework, the vocab, and coding of the Illinois Arts Standards. And we're going to actually attach this document to the webinar website, and hopefully you guys have seen this. I actually love this. This is actually the NAEA Lesson Design Challenge. I think it's a fantastic graphic organizer and visual of how the 4 artistic processes interrelate to one another, how they're always embraced by assessment. And you know, something really important that's probably not for this webinar, but just to always make note, assessment is different than grading. Those are 2 very different things. So how do we provide feedback and help students grow? How do we use assessment to inform instruction? Grading is the actual evaluation. And I think sometimes that gets confused. But on a side note, this is just a fantastic document. I think once we have learning targets identified, then that allows teachers and teams to go back and lesson plan, unit plan using those learning targets and this particular graphic organizer around this. So first and foremost, just a little background knowledge and review about the Illinois Arts Standards and the National Core Arts Standards is the expansion of the definition of fine arts. We all know is traditionally music, art, theater, dance, and now there's media arts is combined, which I think really is a wonderful addition, allows us some great opportunities to hone in on media arts, bring some more colleagues into the discussion, and also improve collaboration, because I don't think media arts is seen as isolated art form outside of music, art, theater, dance. We're actually trying to form collaborative groups now within media arts that includes members of our music team that are doing music production, includes traditionally maybe like technology ed or applied arts folks from the high school. It includes visual arts for folks that are doing computer art or graphic design or print media or video sound editing, all those sort of new ways to really look at how do they go through the artistic processes. So the Illinois Arts Standards really embraced the National Core Arts Standards with a few minor changes, but the whole new art form of media arts is now recognized. For the Illinois Arts Standards, we know that we are looking at 4 artistic processes, and these are not looking at really trying to emphasize what does it take to be an artist? What is the process it takes to go through to create art? And those 4 artistic processes are creating, which means conceiving and developing new artistic ideas and work. I have performing, which is actually under music, dance, and theater, but in art, this is actually presenting. So how do we present art? How is art presented? Responding, understanding, and evaluating how arts convey meaning. So we're talking about the idea of criticism and understanding criteria. And then there is connecting. So this is relating artistic ideas and work with personal meaning and external context. So really getting into this aspect of interpretation and what does art mean to you? What does art mean to society? What does art mean to cultures? So really these are 4 artistic processes, and how are they always interrelated throughout units of study? Underneath each artistic process, we have anchor standards, and there's a total of 11 anchor standards and approximately three anchor standards for each. So for creating, you will see these 3 anchor standards. These are general, broad artistic skills, big blanket level skills that address the various artistic processes. It's a great way to understand that the performance standards by grades are organized by these anchor standards. This is the philosophical, this is the overall framework for the standards. On the far left, we can actually see the 4 artistic processes. We then know that these are divided by the anchor standards. And then as we read the standards from left to right, these are going to be the grade by grade performance standards. And from high school, they changed to introductory, intermediate, and advanced. So that's a little bit different than the nationals. The one thing I really like about this artistic, the framework for this is that the overarching understanding is this idea of artistic literacy, and that's focused on the philosophical foundation and lifelong goals. And if you guys haven't visited the NCAS, the National Core Arts Standards resource page, they have a lot of really, really good resources, and this is one of them. This is the philosophical foundation and lifelong goals for the National Core Arts Standards. And it's really these ideas that we're looking at the students as they exit their high school experience, and what should they achieve, and why do we hold these philosophical foundations true. And it's the belief that the arts are used as communication. The arts are used for creative realizations artistic literate citizens should really participate in the artistic discipline. The arts are important for culture, history, and connecting people together. And last but not, the last 2 is the arts are a mean to well-being. All right, in the state of Illinois, we're always focused on social and emotional learning. We have state goals with that. Here's a perfect connection where we see the aspects of well-being embedded in our state standards. And then, as we all know, the arts are a means to community engagement. So these 5 philosophical ideas are embedded in all of the state standards, and with the overarching goal that all of our students will leave the classroom being artistically literate. And I think that's something very important to focus on. So this process, it's not about making a beautiful work of art, not making a cookie cutter work of art. It's about students understanding and really becoming artistically literate. So something really important to use and understand. Some other really important aspects of the standards when we break down some basic vocabulary is that enduring understandings, these are big ideas, core processes. These should go beyond the classroom and be discussed over the course of really over the course of the year and even going multiple years. We have essential questions or EQs. These are not answerable in a brief sentence. They're supposed to stimulate thought and provoke inquiry. They're supposed to guide students to uncover the enduring understandings. So I like to run teachers through scavenger hunts. So can they find the artistic process? Can they find anchor standards? Can they find enduring understandings? Can we find essential questions? Can we find process components? These are typically one words that really kind of just highlight what the band of performance standards are for. And then the performance standard is actually the grade by grade standard. So just trying to help develop some common language that might be helpful. And then we have the coding for classes or for the specific performance standards. And understanding the coding, I think, is important, especially for the process that we've developed. I'll often run folks through trying to decode and locate various performance standards. But understanding the code here, when we see VA, that's going to stand for visual arts. We have CR, that's going to stand for the artistic process of creating. 2.3 is going to be, this is the second anchor standard with the third enduring understanding. And then 5 is going to be the grade level. So visual arts creating 2.3, grade 5. PR is present, RE is respond, CN is connect. High schools, they start getting into Roman numerals. So we're going to say introductory is I, intermediate is II, and advanced is III, for Roman numeral 3. So I'll have the teams that we're working on initially just making sure they're familiar how to find these, how to navigate, how to decode. Because once we start writing learning targets, we are coding our learning targets that are going to be aligned to each individual anchor standard. All right. So hopefully that made sense, the vocab, the coding. Next, we're going to talk about how do we engage in collaboratively unpacking and interpreting the standards. So basically my experience with the standards is I've been really involved with that feedback process. I can't say I've ever really sat on the committee that wrote them, but when the committees were asking for feedback, I always engaged our faculty and leadership teams to at least look them over, offer feedback. I also participated in a couple of the IAEA workshops with Olivia and Ann Becker. Jonathan Vanderbug of Illinois Arts Alliance had a workshop on the South Side that I was able to go to. And then again, some of the professional development activities we've planned around them. And one of the things that I've really got interested in, or I thought was really effective, is what I like to call Olivia Goody's suggested process. And this is how do we unpack and really interpret the individual performance standards. So I encourage folks to, first of all, form these consortiums. Get the kindergarten through high school art teachers together working around this. So if you guys are one single district or a unit district, we need to find time to get together to look at these standards. As we saw from the national recommendations of the lifelong goals, we're looking at the whole child's experience. So we can't think about what's our only one part here. We got to think about the student and how is our collection of art teachers responsible for that student. So once you get together, I suggest we're going to form partners or small groups. We're actually going to pick an anchor standard and we're going to read out loud the anchor standards, the EUs, the EQs, and then we're going to read the performance standards horizontally across. And I also encourage folks to draw lines between grade 2 and 3, between grade 5 and 6, between 8 and introductory high school. And for better sake, this just allows us to think of the students' education over their 4 quarters of their lifetime, if we're thinking about their lifetime being, kindergarten or early childhood through high school. And as teachers read through this, we ask them to recognize the progression and the vertical alignment of these skills. I ask teachers to notate key words such as verbs or nouns or very important descriptors. what you'll start to see is how this skill is grown over time, and also how these skills are really importantly scaffolded based on previous learning experiences. So again, I think for the idea of the whole child, how do we think about how each step is important to get to that artistically literate citizen to reach all of these? So what we do is we model this, we work together, reading this, recognizing the progression, notating keywords and verbs, referencing the glossary. If you haven't seen this, this is in the back of the Illinois Art Standards. This is a very good resource if you have questions of like, what do they mean when they say imaginative play? What do they mean when they say concept? So this is a really another great resource to reference. Make sure we're all talking about the same thing. After we've read through and again read out loud to one another, we're really going to take kind of a close reading strategy where we're going to continue reading over time, multiple times. And after we get through the first time, we're going to go back through it a second time, that same anchor standard, that same band of performance standards. And we're going to ask 3 questions. What is each performance standard saying? What does it mean? You know, what it says on the book and these might mean something different to us. So we want to make sure we're working together to interpret what that's saying in our language, in our own vernacular, in words that make sense to our collaborative K through 12 team. This also then allows the opportunity for teachers to start talking about what are some examples of what we do, what we are doing to meet these standards. And then in the event we're not there, what are some examples we could do, we might do to meet each standard? So we've developed a handout or a form that we've attached to the webinar website. So hopefully if you guys want to use this, feel free. And it's really just a collaborative document for teachers to then take minutes and notes on this. We ask them to fill out which artistic process are they talking about, what anchor standard and number are they talking about. We have them fill out these aspects. Again, it's just another process of familiarizing themselves with the big ideas, the essential questions to ask students, and the enduring understanding. So teachers will go through and in their own words, what are these key points? For grade by grade, what are examples of what we do? What are some examples of what we might do? And some tips I have for everyone is first, when you're facilitating these meetings with the teams of teachers, model the process together and fill it out together first. You know, it's that as a teacher, it's the I do, we do, or I do, you do, I do, we do, you do, excuse me, I got that. I do, we do, you do. And I think it really builds not only familiarity with what we're doing, it kind of establishes expectations, and it shows you how quickly you can get through this process. After you read it out loud and work through this together, I'm honestly saying you could probably get through this process in about 30 minutes for one entire anchor standard. After you do it together, tip 2 is repeat this process. Form small mixed groups as best you can. Try to form it with elementary, middle, and high schools, and split up the responsibilities. So if we just did creating standard, anchor standard 1.1, have the next group do creating anchor standard 1.2, then have the next do 2.1 and 2.2 and 2.3. Really try to get through entire artistic processes if you can in a single meeting, maybe a 3 to 4 hour meeting, if you're lucky enough to be able to group enough people together and allow that much time. And then after you complete this, tip number 3 is have each group document these conversations in a Google Doc. And when they finish this work after maybe 30, 45 minutes, have each group then share out their findings to the larger group. So this way we're kind of doing the divide and conquer. We're doing jigsaw activities to cover the responsibilities of all anchor standards, and really just get down the basis work of, as a group, we've unpacked, we've interpreted these into our language, our words, and we've really started to make meanings of what we're doing and what we could do to reach these. So just kind of stepping back and looking at the visual arts anchor standards and enduring understandings, if we're looking at creating, there are 7 different bands. Under presenting, there are 3 different bands. Under responding, there are 4. And under connecting, there's 2. So just thinking the tip 4, I just have, consider approximately 45 minutes for a mixed group to unpack and interpret. If you have larger groups, you can divide and conquer and really facilitate getting through this first step of unpacking and interpreting. We're spending, as I mentioned, 4 days this year. We actually interpreted presenting last year. We unpacked and presenting last year. So we're really making our way through this process this year. So that's the unpacking and interpreting. The last aspect that we get to is creating learning targets, and we're developing these common I can statements. And after we've done the mixed groups, now it's important to form common grade teacher groups. So now we're looking at early elementary, late elementary, middle school, and high school. And now we're going to work horizontally across those unpacking documents. So the new groups will review all unpacking documents and focus on their grade bands. So we're going to have the early elementary folks focus on the early childhood through grade 2, learning performance standards that we've unpacked. We're going to have the next group from grade 3 to 5, the next group from 6 to 8, and then the high school groups get together. And they're going to review all of those unpacking documents, really try to look at what is that high school student's experience, what is that middle school student's experience supposed to be, what is that early elementary experience supposed to do. And they're really going to start prioritizing of what is really essential. Our goal, again, is we're not looking at every particular grade by grade performance standard at this point for our consortium work. We're only looking at developing learning targets for grade 2, 5, 8, and high school. So out of those, 2 or 3 years per anchor standard, what do we feel is the most essential? What is the most important? Do we need to combine, edit, or potentially exclude? And throughout this process, we're really considering what evidence of student learnings will be there. So from there, we're going to move to a different document that's also attached to the Illinois Webinar website. And this is more aligned for grades. So for those different grade teams of 2, 5, 8, and high school, they would then work to develop the student learning targets. So for example, for visual arts, creating anchor standard 1.1, what do all those ideas mean after we've unpacked it? I can fill in the blank. Then they'll go into the next anchor standard 1.2. After all that, I can. And teachers are going to work in together from the student's perspective. What will the student be able to do? And they're going to go through all of the anchor standards to write learning targets. Do I have some tips here? I do have tips. I think it's important to work as a large group through the initial stages of writing learning targets. I would suggest forming a steering committee to proof the work and really consider how do these learning targets vertically align. So how does the second grade creating anchor standard 1.1 vertically align with the 5th grade creating learning target for anchor standard 1.1? And then how does it align to the 8th grade in the high school? the smaller group can really fine tune and refine these. And I think it's a much more productive model. Here's some examples where these are our draft targets. These are actually aligned now by artistic process. The handout I had before was more by grade, looking at all 4 artistic processes. So for 5th grade, you can see Anchor Standard 1.1. At this point, we've identified the learning target as I can combine ideas to make art in a new way. For Anchor Standard 1.2, I choose from a variety of methods when beginning a work of art. So this is, again, our process that we've worked in small teams, and then we'll have larger teams or smaller teams come back and fine tune it. So how does 1.1, I can combine ideas to make art in new ways, align with the 8th grade? I can combine ideas, apply methods, and document the artistic process through collaboration and perseverance in traditional and new medias. So in my opinion right now, that's a little wordy. You got a lot going on there. We'll probably scale that down and just be a little bit more specific. And then again, how does this look at the high school, advanced high school? Through the use of reflecting, planning, and establishing intent, I can develop ideas that affect social change. So we would then have a smaller group refine these and go through them. So again, our goals for the articulation was to use the Illinois Art Standards to vertically and horizontally align our student outcomes. We're looking to develop grade 2, 5, 8, and advanced high school learning targets. Once these are created, it will then be the expectation that these are adopted at every school in our consortium district, and that these will then be the targets that we use and strive for. Moving forward, after we establish these, we're going to be looking at what might assessment look like. We're trying to scale these learning targets to make sure they're on a 4-point scale. I think that's going to be next year's work. So really including language about how well, so we can have some adverbs in there to really start looking at assessment and benchmarking students' work and things like that. And then we can also use the lesson design template here to really start having school districts unit plan, lesson plan, using our learning targets, but choosing how they want to reach those learning targets. Again, we're not trying to tell teachers what they need to teach or how they teach. That's going to be up to the goal. That will be the district's work. But the aspect of the learning target, what students are able to achieve, the skill they're able to develop, will be expected through these outcomes. So that's going to be the process we're working through, using some of the templates by the NAEA Design Challenge moving forward. So, boy, I hope this was meaningful. I know there's a lot of information, and I felt like I was rambling, so I hope you found that meaning. Let's see if we have any questions going on here. Got one right now. How do you make sure certain skills are taught, such as using organic shapes, primary colors, 2-point perspectives? Yes, those are great. Okay, so let me read this. How do you make sure certain skills are taught, such as using organic shapes, primary colors, and 2-point perspectives? So those I would consider living underneath the learning target. I think those are almost going to be more probably like, so the standard would be creating, the anchor standard would be the objective, then we have our learning target, so that's going to be the level 3 in the hierarchy of the learning target. I would think any sort of content knowledge, elements and principles of design, skills and techniques, those are going to be level 4. Those are going to live under the learning targets, and that's going to be discussed with some more recommendations from our consortium. So we'll try to say, like, after we have these skills and learning targets, what might be recommendations of the consortium of when these elements come in play. Oh, I think I see another question here. Do you have any suggestions for people who are the only art teacher in their district? How would you go about working through this process? That's a very good, great question, and something that's very real. We understand that. I think the best thing we can do is really try. Is there any possibility of forming professional learning communities that you could? We like to say sometimes professional learning communities without walls. Is there? Can we branch out to maybe larger school districts? Are there colleagues that you can work with? Maybe we need to do this at IAEA in a couple weeks here down in St. Charles. Maybe we need to have some roundtable discussions and start doing this. But I really think this process obviously can be done individually. It's a lot of work by yourself, but I think the real power is when you're working with colleagues. So is there any form of colleagues that you can connect with virtually, by phone? That's what I'd suggest. I hope that helps. Any other questions you guys have? Here's one. What are some good resources? Definitely the National Core Arts Standards website resource page is wonderful. As I mentioned, they have some of the philosophical foundations. They got a really great research from the College Board about child development and the importance of the arts. I would definitely check that out as well. Oh, got another question here. How have we gotten people on board with this, and how do you promote buy-in? I think most importantly, we need to really emphasize the importance that these are core to our students' education. I think sometimes there is a sense that the fine arts are fluff and extra and really nice. I think we really need to enforce the idea that Illinois State has identified these as essential, and that really it's the expectation that these are implemented for all students in all art forms at every grade level. I'd also reference the Every Student Succeed Acts, where the visual and performing arts are identified as essential, and you know, as part of a well-rounded experience. So continuing to emphasize those, find a voice, find that leadership to partner with, try to find that College Board child development research that's absolutely fantastic on the benefits of students engaging in the arts, that focus on social, emotionally, cognitively, physically, all very, very great findings of that research that just gathers research that has been put together. Someone's asking here, what are the first steps we need to take? If I would suggest trying to find release time. Will your school administration support getting you a sub for a day, getting release for a half day, and try to find time where you can just pick up the phone and meet teachers from other school districts? I think that's important. Build those relationships. Again, we may be doing district art festivals, but really are we looking at curriculum, instruction, and assessment? The kind of the real emphasis of professional learning communities. And I think those would be the first steps. Build those relationships, request support from your administration. So I think that's all for now, but again, you guys have my contact information. Don't hesitate to follow up if you have something that I didn't answer, if you have further questions. Always happy to help, but I hope you guys had a good day and this was meaningful for you, and thank you guys. Have a good night.